There are two participants in this conference. Please announce yourself.
This is the 523 Happy Hour with your host, Kelly Lincoln, here on netrootsradio.com.
The coolest way to start your weekend
is with me. Yeah, this is like take 3. I'm so brilliant. It just wasn't. I forgot to punch a button. And as a result, I'm running like right on time. Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome. It is the Saturdays, and September, no, it's October 12th. And what can I say about the day? Got some, I try and get myself like flippin' organized, and it just doesn't always, and it just doesn't always happen the way it's supposed to. Like, every time I turn my head, and you're hearing all that noise as I move the microphone closer to my mouth, I fade out and fade in. The hazards of using a dynamic mic where you have to be like right on top of it, almost sucking it down. And, well, you're listening, of course, to once a moment to the Eris and ADH approved 523 Happy Hour, where we meander through the days and the weeks of and whatever crosses my mind in whatever fashion it does, and just get it out, and whatever my brain wants to do, it does it, because that's what it is. And of course, we have the Week in Review. Not only that, we have an actual hero of the Republic. We have a recipient of the glorious Order of the Crock Chamber Pot today. May have been the same one as last week, but, it just keeps getting better for this particular person. And we have the slang word of the week and other stuff. So, how my week went? It went well. I am happy, healthy, going into 5780. Happy Shana Tova, Yom Tov, to all of my...
The coolest way to start your weekend.
The joy of... It's just like so much fun, I tried to stick to schedule. Look, I'm going to do this and this, but it doesn't happen. And all I have to say is...
Up is down. Well, that's just maddeningly unhelpful. Why are these things never clear?
I don't know. Why is that? I actually have shit planned out, but it never really goes that way. So I've just decided to stop giving show descriptions, because show notes in the notes when you download this, because it's never going to adhere to what I want. And I can have all the paperwork I want that gives me my idea of what's going on here, and it never actually happens. I try and be professional about this. I like it. I love it. And yet, when it comes down to it, my mind maps it's just never happening. And that's what happens when you're attention deficit and you can't keep your brain on one thing, and you have a shit ton of papers printed out, and you're going to have to put a pens through them so you can recycle them. I do know the one thing that you are going to do is you are going to get a short story read. And I think it's absolutely perfect, because I think it's a perfect metaphor for today. Well, not maybe a perfect metaphor, but it's a Hans Christian Andersen story called The Wicked Prince. And some of the cool shit that we came up with. Now, I'm going to go in with the... hero of the... before I enter into Hero of the Republic, we're going to go into the slang word of the week, and that is patsy. Patsy is spelled Patsy, and it's not. And while it's also a short diminutive of Patricia, it is also a slang for somebody that is easily manipulated or victimized, a pushover. And we see our the wannabe mob boss in chief, the Don, doing that. Gotta take my, because I only really need to use these when I'm like listening to shit. And I think the latest person to get played, who just got thrown onto the subway tracks at 47th at Rockefeller Center, because that is the closest subway station to Trump Tower, is Rudy Giuliani.
Being with Cohen, Ty Cobb, and Jay Sekulow, while the feds get closer every night, bitching and moaning and tweeting and groaning. A new lawyer will make things right. Whoa, Giuliani. Giuliani, why are you still there? Don't you know the president's a commie? Giuliani, we don't really care. Oh, Giuliani. Giuliani, why are you still there? Don't you know the president's a commie? Giuliani, we don't really care.
And thank you, Rocky Mountain Mike, for giving me permission to use your brilliant parodies. And it gets better, because he's now under criminal investigation due to his associates who were arrested while on their way to Vienna with a one-way ticket. And Rudy was going to join them a couple of days later. Now, curiously, about dear Rudy, who is actually our hero of the Republic and the recipient of the Glorious Order of the Cracked Chamber Pot. He also had a ticket to Vienna, it gets more interesting from there, because one of the Ukrainians that was arrested on the plane before he could get out of Dodge worked as a translator, translating Dmitry Firtash, who is Russian, Firtash, Ukrainian oligarch. So we got lots of like little. Everything it's like a coil. It's like circling back in on itself. Not quite a drain yet, but it's getting there. And like I said, Now, once it was announced that Giuliani is under investigation, lo and behold, when the occupant in the People's House was asked about his the two associates whom 45 claims he never met. And yet, but there's photos of him with him and like his son, and they're like having a backslapping good time. He said when he was asked, he pulled a "never saw them before in my life" routine, and Trump, when he was asked, Trump said, "I don't know those gentlemen. Now, it's possible I have a picture with them because I have a picture with everybody. Maybe they were clients of Rudy's." You'd have to ask Rudy. Now, the last time he said that, that was regarding Michael Cohen. And Cohen's doing like 3 years right now. So Rudy has just been thrown onto the subway tracks, as I said. He's been front stabbed, as the mooch would say, not backstabbed. Trump doesn't backstab; he front stabs because he telegraphs that he's coming at you with a nice pick, and basically he stabs you with it repeatedly. So there's it's up close and personal, and stabbing in the back is a coward's act. He just like goes up in front and never saw him before in my life. So, and this is after all the work that Rudy is doing regarding the crap conspiracy theories, which is the Senate's verdict. This is from Salon. The committee Senate verdict: Rudy Giuliani's conspiracy theory is crap. And, well, there are a number of fringe right-wing figures who have made a tidy profit from spreading this theory, and that is the fact that there was no foreign interference, unless it comes from yeah. But, oh, the joys of living in New York. Of course, it's like, gotta love the, now, I don't know if that police car was going to an actual emergency or playing with their it's like they have all these new siren signals, so it's like, well, they're going somewhere. It's the same signal over and over, but they don't use a sine wave anymore, which is the. They use a square wave now, which is like whoop 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 whoop, and then they have like the combination of the whoop whoop whoop, because it's the way it works. I can never tell anymore when they're on an emergency thing, but anyway. Going back to Giuliani. See, what gets me about all of this stuff and the fact that he's now being investigated under federal investigation and the fact that he is turning out to be no better than basic mobster, and that he's corrupt as shit. We have to remember his good pal and partner Bernie Kerik, who did time for fraud, I think. Something like that. He makes me kind of wonder if all those convictions he got, well, he broke up the mob in New York City. So I gotta wonder if if those convictions are now going to be looked at a bit more closely because corruption. I mean, if he's got no compunctions about doing dirty work for his buddy Donald Trump, he's got what makes you think he wouldn't be so dishonest as to dissemble and to get down and dirty in order to achieve his aims. So anyway, so we have that. I'm gonna play around a bit more with my there we go. See if that works a little bit better. Yeah, I don't know if that does or not. But oh, and with the, by the way, he thinks that the timing of the arrests, namely while they were on the plane getting ready to fly to Vienna on a one-way ticket, was extremely suspect. I think Mr. Giuliani needs to check himself. Nope. Yeah, I know I'm disjointed, and again, partly that's not an excuse, but I go off on these tangents, as you know, and so going back to the center, I'm going to read this whole article because it's short. Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani's business-related interactions with the men charged with the campaign finance crimes on Thursday are subject of a criminal investigation out of New York, according to two reports. Not one, but two. According to ABC News, the probe is being spearheaded by the FBI field office in New York and prosecutors as the SDNY. You know, and that's kind of delicious because you would think that with all his contacts in the FBI, that they would have, you know, tipped him off that it was coming. But no, they did not. Which means they hate him just as much as they hated Hillary. And Giuliani used to run the SDNY when he was a federal prosecutor. CNN also reported that the interactions are being investigated by federal authorities. Two of Giuliani's associates, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, and two other businessmen were charged Thursday for their attempts to help Giuliani with his Biden smear campaign by ousting the ambassador to Ukraine. Giuliani told a Fox News reporter Thursday that the timing of the arrests were, quote-unquote, extremely suspect, and that he believes the indictment is tied to his attempts to drum up a phony scandal about the Bidens. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. And Giuliani claims that, you know, he's trying to claim a privilege. He's trying to avoid having to deal with probably one of the investigations is probably having to do with his lobbying or working on behalf of a foreign government. Although with the foreign agents lobbying things. Although he's saying, no, I wasn't lobbying for Ukraine, I was lobbying for the president. But, you know, it's like when you're dealing with, it's maybe we got a RICO thing going here, man. Racketeering, is that possible? Could be, you never know. Something to do any day, I don't know right away. But we all, you know, when I know we're all burnt out, and I'm not exactly always coherent on this, however, the more one dives into it, not just by what is said in American media, but the Guardian and European media, the more one comes to believe that we have a RICO investigation, a racketeering investigation happening with multiple violations of the RICO Act, extortion, and it gets even more mind-boggling with the knowledge that the WIMP has contaminated the code word server. It's compromised that server. Because now if it's subpoenaed, who's going to go in and grab that stuff? And you have Bill Barr, who, by the way, has the senator from New Jersey, Pasquarelli. God bless New Jersey, has filed Bill Pasquarelli Jr. Of New Jersey has filed complaints with the D.C. and Virginia bars calling for bars licenses to be revoked in D.C. and Virginia. And people are also finding it rather suspect that Shep Smith resigned from Fox News 2 days after Bill Barr had a little chat with Rupert Murdoch about that negative poll. So collusion. Barr said he doesn't care about his reputation, but he should. Yeah, but then again, he's always been a man of questionable ethics, as far as I am concerned. You can always... And, the more one looks at how this is all going down... Now, I readily admit I don't have the investigative chops that the major names have, but I have my own opinions and my own take on things, and if it may not be exactly clear, but I had... There was a very, very close friend of the family's and of my parents. And I never knew what he did for a living, but he had money, took trips and all this, he had, And the backstory was, the legend was, the myth was that he had been in the Chicago mob and he moved to California to keep his sons out of the mob. That was the story. True? I have no clue. We never inquired. It was like something you never asked. But I'm fairly certain, and actually, in the old days of Usenet, I had a lot of fun invoking my Uncle Jack with some folks because, like I said, it's like part of the mob. Yeah, I'll let you talk to my Uncle Jack. He and his wife were really wonderful people, and they were not blood relations, but they were very close to my parents. And I don't know about you, but if I wasn't allowed to call my parents' friends by their first names. Aunt or uncle had to be placed in front of their names out of respect, which is fine. I have no issues with that. But all I see is and going back to little Donnie Squeeze Grab, is a guy who really doesn't quite understand the movie characters he modeled himself on. And I said this last week, that he's playing the movie concept of a mob boss, which means it ain't going to end well. I mean, he wasn't able to get close enough to the Gaudis to model himself on the Gaudis. And it's kind of amazing that, again, going back to Rudy, that he's willingly associating with somebody and working for someone who fancies themselves a mob boss. But then again, Rudy's daddy was in the mob, allegedly. And that's why he became a lawyer and a federal prosecutor. But then again, he also could have been working for the mob, putting away his adversaries. He did a great work for the Russian mob by breaking up the mafia. Oh, damn it. I forgot to play my Kook of the Week theme, so I'm going to play it for you right now.
This is the Kook of the Week.
It's still Rudy Giuliani. And it's not easy being this disjointed. Trust me. See, I can go off on tangents like Trump, but I don't need the Adderall to do it, and I don't need uppers to get me. It's just how my brain works.
Hi, it's Tom. Just asking in the spirit of the season, which you probably have been racking your brain to give to a most worthy cause, could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Sound the general alarm! Sound the general alarm! Sound the general alarm! Off to the deck!
Yeah, gotta sound that general
Sound
alarm.
the general alarm! Sound the general alarm! Sound the general alarm! Off to the deck!
And the reason why the general alarm is being sounded is because white nationalists are sad and terrified and upset and traumatized because they have been doxxed, and they're worried about their employability in the future. And how do I know this? I'm looking at an article here that discusses this. And in fact, they were supported. A support group has been started for those poor people who have been doxxed, mostly with public information. Now, I am a survivor of the Usenet flame wars that decimated a couple of Usenet groups. And doxing, was done all the time. And I got stalked, and there's a bunch of other shit, you know. And actually, this actually caused Identity Europa to rebrand themselves as the American Identity Movement. And I gotta say, thanks to Unicorn Riot, you've got to check them out and support them. They are awesome anti-fascists, and they are the ones that risk. They're the ones that published chat logs of these poor little haters and getting them fired for their hateful ideology. Well, you know, I don't think the Civil Rights Act covers hate groups. And a new trove of leaked messages from the white nationalist group American Identity Movement reveals members of the far-right group scrambling to repair their images after their names were made public. All from public information. See, I don't consider, you know, your address is public, your name is public, phone number is public unless it's unlisted. It's all there for, you know, it's all public. Now, releasing things like social security numbers or unlisted phone numbers, that's a different story. That's private information. That's not public information. Medical records are not public information. The group's name is a publicity maneuver in itself. The group is formerly known as Identity Europa, but rebranded earlier this year after leftist media collective Unicorn Riot published the group's racist chat logs. Aw, poor babies. Poor babies. It's hard being a racist and a bigot. Or at least to be out, you know. You want your equal rights. Nah. Some lines have to be drawn and not crossed. So, the newest set of leaked messages, also published by Unicorn Riot, finds IM members contemplating everything from name changes to career changes without considering the change that might solve their problems for good. Not being racist. You want to solve your issues, stop being racist. I know that's difficult because it's a learned behavior, but you can unlearn the behavior. When I was assaulted in the 6th grade because I'm Jewish, I knew, even though it was like verbal and physical assault, I still understood that it's what they had been taught. And in fact, when I was in college, attending Diablo Valley College, which is a junior college, 2-year thing, and I was attending the school to get my breadth requirements, my general ed requirements out of the way so I could focus on my major. One of the guys that beat me up on a regular basis and verbally abused me, you know, assaulted me, apologized. Came up to me and said, apologize. That, you know, he apologized for being an asshole. Like I said, it's learned behavior and it can be unlearned. I keep going back to the All in the Family episode with the wonderful drag queen, whose name now escapes. Laurie Shannon. It's a 2-parter. And that was the beginning of the re-education of Archie Bunker. Because first of all, he discovered that gay people are human beings. And then he was confronted with the violence directed towards gay men. When Laurie's character and Mike, Archie's son-in-law, were attacked and beaten because the haters thought that they were a gay couple. And in the resulting assault, Laurie Shannon's character dies. and it's on Christmas. And when Edith opens, they're opening presents, and Edith opens the one left by Laurie. And when she sees it and realizes that it's from him, she breaks down. And that, again, starts Archie on his recovery from being a bigot. And there's a difference. Well, can a racist learn? Who knows? Be retrained? Yes, I think so. Because, like I said, it's a learned behavior. It's how you don't take responsibility by putting the blame for your inability to do X, Y, or Z on somebody else. So and so made me do it. The devil made me do it. If you hadn't, it's sort of like an abuser. If you hadn't, if I wouldn't have had to hit you if you hadn't done X, Y, or Z. Anyway, going back to these poor white nationalists. Quote, I was just thinking about if I had to change my name, what would I change it to and how would I sign my new signature? One AM member wrote in the group's specialized chat channel for members whose identities had been revealed. He opted against the name change after trying to practice his new signature. Members called the chat group Dox Support, a reference to doxing, the act of revealing someone's personal information online. The tactic is popular with anti-fascists. It's popular with fascists as well. Since their identities were revealed earlier this year, multiple members have been fired from jobs, including school police officers and teachers. Good. In March and April, the Huffington Post identified 11 service members who belonged to the group, some of whom were subsequently dismissed. So these poor little racists are having problems finding jobs because they have to because they're racists, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, these days to mask it. And I have to say, they need to go back and, I don't know if they need to go back into their closet, but they need to understand that you can say whatever you want, you can believe whatever you want, but you have to understand it's not that beliefs and behaviors are not consequence-free. It's like speech. You have the right to say anything you want. That's freedom of speech. But that does not exempt you from the consequences of said speech or actions. If you want to be a hate-filled individual, that's fine. But don't expect to be embraced by people who aren't hate-filled. Simple as that. Just as simple as that. Especially if you're in the teaching professions, or you're a cop, or in the military. Are you an oath keeper? Are you an oath breaker? Just like Thwimp is an oath.
You're listening to the 523 Happy Hour with Kelly Lincoln here on netrootsradio.com.
never meant for my song for you to borrow. You're not supposed to use it on your campaign. You're gonna get a cease and desist tomorrow. I only want to end it now in this turd campaign. Turd campaign. Turd campaign. I only want to end it now in this turd campaign.
That again was Turd Campaign by Rocky Mountain Mike. Some of the doxed racists were like having issues. One of whom, was trying to figure out how to explain themselves. To a family member whose son it was dating a black woman. Poor baby was upset that said son was turning his back on him every time he came into the room, wouldn't talk with him. How do I explain him? How do I explain I'm a racist bastard? How do I try and make him understand? It's not personal. It's okay. It's not. It's like his girlfriend's okay. But it's really not. Now, I promised you a short story, The Wicked Prince by Hans Christian Andersen. And I'm going to read it to you. There lived once upon a time a wicked prince whose heart and mind were set upon conquering all the countries of the world and on frightening the people. He devastated their countries with fire and sword, and his soldiers trod down the crops in the fields and destroyed the peasants' huts by fire, so that the flames licked the green leaves off the branches and the fruit hung dried up upon the single black trees. Many a poor mother fled, her naked baby in her arms, behind the still smoking walls of her cottage. But also there were the soldiers followed her. And when they found her, she served as a new nourishment to their diabolical enjoyments. Demons could not possibly have done worse things than these soldiers. The prince was of the opinion that all this was right, and that it was only the natural course which things ought to take. His power increased day by day, his name was feared by all, and fortune favored his deeds. He brought enormous wealth home from the conquered towns, and gradually accumulated in his residence riches which could nowhere be equaled. He erected magnificent palaces, churches, and halls, and all who saw these splendid buildings and great treasures exclaimed, admiring, "What a mighty prince!" But they did not know what endless misery he had brought upon other countries, nor did they hear the sighs and lamentations which rose up from the debris of the destroyed cities. The prince often looked with delight upon his gold and his magnificent edifices and thought, like the crowd, "What a mighty prince! But I must have more, much more. No power on earth must equal mine, far less exceed it." He made war with all his neighbors and defeated them. The conquered kings were chained up with the golden fetters to his chariot when he drove through the streets of his city. These kings had to kneel at his and his courtiers' feet when they sat at table, and live on the morsels which they left. At last the prince had his own statue erected on the public places and fixed on the royal palaces. Nay, he even wished it to be placed in the churches on the altars. But in this the priest opposed him, saying, Prince, you are mighty indeed, but God's power is much greater than yours. We dare not obey your orders. Well, said the prince, then I will conquer God too. And in his haughtiness and foolish presumption he ordered a magnificent ship to be constructed, with which he could sail through the air. It was gorgeously fitted out and of many colors, like the tail of a peacock. It was covered with 1,000 eyes, but each eye was the barrel of a gun. The prince sat in the center of the ship and had only to touch a spring in order to make thousands of bullets fly out in all directions, while the guns were at once loaded again. Hundreds of eagles were attached to this ship, and it rose with the swiftness of an arrow towards the sun. The earth was soon left far below, and looked with its mountains and woods like a cornfield where the plow had made furrows which separated green meadows. Soon it looked only like a map with indistinct lines upon it, and at last entirely disappeared in the mist and clouds. Higher and higher rose the eagles up into the air, and then God sent one of his numberless angels against the ship. The wicked prince showered thousands of bullets upon him, but they rebounded from his shining wings and fell down like ordinary hailstones. One drop of blood, one single drop, came out of the white feathers of the angel's wings, and fell upon the ship in which the prince sat, burnt into it, and weighed upon it like 1,000 hundredweights, dragging it rapidly down to the earth again. The strong wings of eagles gave way. The wind roared around the prince's head, and the clouds around, were they formed by the smoke rising up from the burnt cities? Took strange shapes like crabs, many, many miles long, which stretched their claws out after him and rose up like enormous rocks from which rolling masses dashed down and became fire-spitting dragons. The prince was lying half dead in his ship when it sank at last with a terrible shock into the branches of a large tree in the wood. I will conquer God, said the prince. I have sworn it. My will must be done. And he spent 7 years in the construction of wonderful ships to sail through the air, and had darts cast from the hardest steel to break the walls of heaven with. He gathered warriors from all countries, so many that when they were placed side by side, they covered the space of several miles. They entered the ships, and the prince was approaching his own, when God sent a swarm of gnats, one swarm of little gnats. They buzzed round the prince and stung his face and hands. Angrily he drew his sword and brandished it, but only touched the air and did not hit the gnats. Then he ordered his servants to bring costly coverings and wrap him in them, that the gnats might no longer be able to reach him. The servants carried out his order, but one single gnat had placed itself inside one of the coverings, crept into the prince's ear, and stung him. The place burnt like fire, and the poison entered into his blood. Mad with pain, he tore off the coverings and his clothes too, flinging them far away, and danced about before the eyes of his ferocious soldiers, who now mocked at him. The mad prince, who wished to make war with God, was overcome by a single little gnat. Now, I am interpreting this short story kind of like a metaphor for Donnie Two Scoops, who is wicked, thinks only of himself, cares not about who dies or the suffering he causes. And seems to be bothered by a gnat called the Constitution. And Article 2. He can yell and scream about how unfair it is, that he has to follow the law, and that he can be removed from office and impeached and convicted. And oh my God, it's going to look so bad on my resume to be called on the carpet and have this placed in my record, because I've been it's kind of like being called into HR for your performance review. And he's afraid of getting a poor performance review. Well, he should be. He should be. And actually, I'm going to treat you to another short story. This one's by Ambrose Bierce. I love Ambrose Bierce. He wrote a lovely dictionary called The Devil's Dictionary. It's available online. I think Gutenberg's got it, gutenberg.org. It's awesome. And this is called The Dog and the Bees. And I can say that a dog being very much annoyed by bees ran quite accidentally into an empty barrel lying on the ground, and looking out at the bunghole, addressed his tormentors thus: "Had you been temperate, stinging me only one at a time, you might have got a good deal of fun out of me. As it is, you have driven me into a secure retreat, for I can snap you up as fast as you come in through the bunghole. Learn from this the folly of intemperate zeal." When he had concluded, he awaited a reply. There wasn't any reply, for the bees had never gone near the bunghole. They went in the same way as he did and made it very warm for him. The lesson of this fable is that one cannot stick to his poor reason while quarreling with bees. The end. Speaking of quarreling with bees, Rand Paul got laughed off the laughed off the View. Got laughed off the stage by the View crowd. And the View audience hooted and jeered Senator Rand Paul for attacking Senator Bernie Sanders and socialism in a contentious panel discussion. The Kentucky Republican was promoting his new book, The Case Against Socialism, but he didn't find a receptive audience for his claims. Quote, "Bernie Sanders' form of socialism is actually unpopular, and he'd never get elected to anything in Denmark," Paul said. In fact, the Prime Minister of Denmark, when he heard Bernie was going around saying he's a socialist, said, No, we're not socialist. We have private property, and we don't have a minimum wage." Unquote. Paul argued that Scandinavian countries paid massive taxes to pay for free stuff that's given out by the government, and Hostin said Americans paid high taxes but had poor health care and public education. Quote, "We have a different form of taxation in our country," Paul countered. "It's much more progressive. We've taken the poor off the rolls. They don't pay income tax anymore. Most people below $50,000 don't pay any income tax. The top 1% in our country pay 40%, unquote. The audience began laughing at the senator's claim, and Hostin called him out, quote, "Our audience says that's not true," she said, and the crowd continued laughing. Paul insisted that the IRS statistics showed the top 1% paid a 40% income tax rate, and the laughter cascaded loudly over the GOP lawmaker. "Donald Trump doesn't pay any income tax," Hostin said. Guest host Ana Navarro asked whether Paul agreed with the president that voting for Democrats would turn the U.S. into a Venezuela-style socialist country, and Paul didn't disagree. "Well, if you vote for a socialist, you might get socialism," Paul said. Navarro erupted, arguing that President Nicolas Maduro Moros was a corrupt, murderous thug who was starving his people. But Paul said that's not true. "That's not true," Navarro shot back. "Maduro is not a thug and murderer who is starving his people." Paul gestured for her to calm down and argued that Venezuelans had voted for socialism, but Navarro cut him off. "That's kleptocracy, not socialism," Navarro said, as Paul objected. "I can't let you finish or you're not going to say Maduro is a murderous thug." The audience went wild, and Paul turned his back to Navarro and waved his hands in her face. "Don't do this to me," Navarro said, mimicking his gesture as the audience continued cheering. "Don't mansplain. I'm 47 years old." Aw, poor booby. Poor Rand. See, Rand Paul's a quote-unquote libertarian who thinks the free market should do its will. So he doesn't understand anything. I don't understand jack shit. You know, the free market has spoken, Rand. Get your ass out of here. And the mere fact he doesn't know the difference between a socialism and a kleptocracy is not promising at all. No, is it? It's not interesting. I'm going to leave you with one more Rocky Mountain Mike because I'm feeling it. Oh. I'm going to leave you with the sad fact about... Actually, the Kurds, while the Kurds may not have been at Normandy, they were busy liberating the Middle East. Let's see, what does it say here? Let's see. Let's see, Turkey. Well, number one. I'm looking through paperwork right now. That's why there's dead air. Now, true, the Kurds did not fight at Normandy, but neutral Turkey was buying the gold that they melted down from the teeth of the people, of the Jews, gypsies, gays, that they murdered in the camps. And in return, Germany was sold chromium ore that they needed for their to build their weapons. And it looks like Turkey has, Turkey pledged it. Never mind that Turkey started out World War II, pledged to support the Allies, only to suddenly switch when it looked like the Nazis would win. For the second time, Turkey was on the wrong side of history. And it looks like it's happening again. They switched sides again because now they're siding with Russia. Turkey began World War II bound to Britain and France by the military alliance of October 1939, moved to non-belligerency in June 1940 after the fall of France, and adopted a policy of active neutrality in the spring of 1941 after German occupation of the Balkans and the conclusion of the German-Turkish Treaty of Friendship in 1941. Report cites a November assessment by German munitions minister Albert Speer that much of Germany's manufacture of armaments would come to halt within 10 months if Turkey's chromite exports to Germany were halted. So Turkey's never been our ally. They're not our friend. We don't, Turkey kept the money it made selling the Nazis chromium. It kept the gold. The report says drilling is stopped after President Franklin Roosevelt threatened Turkey with economic war. So, in 1944, at Normandy, the Kurds had no state. They were scattered over Iran, Syria, and Iraq. They had lost their country with British mandate when a lot of what's going on in the Middle East is due to the ridiculous way Britain carved up the Middle East. Instead of leaving Kurdistan as one, they carved it into two. Gave part of it to Turkey and part of it to Syria. So they created a lot of what's going on as far as what with the Kurds is going on can be traced back to the mandate, British mandate. And Palestine mandate was like Syria, Jordan, all that area. Syria, Palestina, which before the destruction of the Second Temple was known as Judea, Samaria. Damn, those Romans were good at wiping names from memory. And I think all of our allies need to understand that Donnie Two Scoops is a front stabber. Now, America has a bad habit of sucking the Kurds in with promises of X, Y, and Z and then abandoning them, because this is the 8th time America has made a promise to the Kurds, and the 8th time that we've abandoned them. And now the question for our other allies in the Middle East is, can America be trusted to fulfill its obligations to said allies? Israel's worried. Think about that. Israel is worried about America's commitment to the state of Israel. Because America has effectively given up influence to Russia. So there's only, and on that note, stay tuned for Katie Speaks with Katie Klobuchar, and tune in later tonight, 1 a.m. Atlantic, 12 midnight Eastern, and 9 p.m. Pacific for the late night morning talk show with Kelly and Ricky here on netrootsradio.com.